She was humiliated and forced to leave her seat, but only a few minutes later, the flight attendant made her face consequences that no one could have foreseen. What happened on this flight not only changed everything for those on board, but also transformed the entire airline. A seemingly minor incident turned out to be the trigger for an unprecedented chain of events. Ava Carter boarded the plane with absolute confidence, her eyes bright yet calm, making anyone who saw her turn their head. She was the kind of woman that one simply could not ignore. She wore a custom-tailored blazer, with every sharp cut accentuating her perfect figure over a sleek, flowing dress. Her naturally curly locks embraced her delicate face, creating an appearance that was both elegant and irresistibly attractive. In her hand, she carried a glossy black leather handbag, sophisticated yet exuding strength, paired with a boarding pass that was just refined enough to convey her high status. Ava walked down the aisle, each step slow yet steady. Every stride exuded composure, along with a silent determination in her eyes that made everyone sense that Ava was not easily swayed. She stopped at her seat, glanced at the row of seats, and pinpointed her seat number, without any sign of confusion or unfamiliarity. That was the habit of confidence, as if she had flown so many flights like this before, each time effortlessly and without distraction. When Ava sat down, she smiled politely at the passenger beside her, a gentle, bright smile that was not overly effusive. "Hello," said the neighboring passenger with a smile. "It's a pleasure to sit next to you." Ava only nodded lightly, her eyes retaining their calm demeanor, not overly familiar yet not cold either. "Thank you likewise," she replied, then returned her attention to her notebook. She placed her bag in the overhead compartment, took out a small notebook and a pen, and began jotting down a few notes. Another passenger sitting behind, in a curious tone, quietly asked his companion, "She looks so familiar. Isn't that Ava Carter?" The question spread throughout the cabin, and a few people began whispering among themselves, discussing Ava's appearance. "Incredible, she's famous, isn't she?" Another voice chimed in. "Surely she must have a special reason for sitting in first class, I suppose." Someone else nodded gently, their eyes never leaving Ava. But Ava, despite noticing the curious glances, did not show any sign of embarrassment. She remained completely focused on her work. The people around continued to make baseless guesses about her, while Ava simply carried on with her work with absolute concentration. The first-class cabin of Flight 287, always reserved for the elite, now took on an unusual air as Miranda Scott, the flight attendant in a neatly pressed uniform, walked down the aisle. Under the soft yellow lighting, her all-black uniform only enhanced her serious demeanor. Her hair was neatly combed, her expression icy with no trace of emotion, and her steps appeared meticulously planned, exuding assurance and authority. She seemed to spare no passenger, her piercing gaze like a knife slicing through the air, inspecting each person in every seat. When Miranda approached Ava, a heavy air suddenly filled the cabin. Ava was sitting quietly in first class, like a perfect image of elegance and serenity. Her refined black blazer and naturally curly hair framing her delicate face showed no sign of nervousness or worry. Everything about her radiated calmness and determination, as if she were someone who could not be easily shaken. Miranda stopped in front of Ava, and in that moment, the atmosphere seemed to freeze. From someone who previously looked unremarkable, Ava suddenly became the center of attention. "Please present your boarding pass," Miranda requested, her voice carrying an unmistakable coldness. Although not overtly rude, Miranda's eyes clearly carried an air of scrutiny, as if she were assessing Ava from head to toe. Ava looked up, her eyes brightening slightly, yet she showed no sign of confusion or panic. She gently retrieved her boarding pass from her leather handbag and handed it to Miranda without a word. Miranda took the boarding pass, glanced at it once, then paused, her eyes briefly revealing a hint of surprise. She checked the information on the pass, her expression unchanged but her eyebrows furrowed, as if something did not quite match. "How odd," Miranda murmured, but said no more. She returned the boarding pass and walked away, her face still maintaining a professional demeanor, as if nothing unusual had occurred. Yet Miranda could not shake off the strange feeling she sensed from Ava. Although she couldn't pinpoint a clear reason, a suspicion began to creep into her mind. As someone who had worked in this industry for many years and had encountered all types of passengers, Miranda found that Ava, with her calm demeanor and impeccable appearance, had something off. Miranda turned back to the crew lounge where the other flight attendants were preparing drinks for the passengers. Unable to shake her thoughts about Ava, Miranda approached fellow attendant Clara, who was organizing supplies. "Clara, did you notice the girl in first class?" Miranda asked in a low, questioning tone. "Which girl?" Clara replied, slightly frowning as she listened. "Ava Carter," Miranda said, her tone still vague. "She seems out of place. I have a feeling something isn't right." Clara looked back toward first class, her eyes still puzzled. "But she has a first-class ticket." "Miranda, are you sure you're not mistaken?" Miranda bit her lip, her gaze sharper than ever. "I'm not sure, Clara. It's as if she harbors a secret. This feeling, I can't quite explain." She turned away, but the suspicion still lingered in her mind. After a few minutes, unable to shake her uneasy feeling, Miranda decided to return to first class. She found Ava sitting as quietly as before, but this time Miranda could no longer keep her composure. Standing before Ava once more, her gaze stern and devoid of any sympathy, she said, "Ms. Carter, I need to ask you to move to the main cabin. There appears to be an error with your ticket." Ava looked up without any sign of confusion or question. Calmly, she replied, "My ticket was confirmed last week." "Miranda, could you please check again?" Miranda frowned slightly, unable to ignore the strange feeling about Ava. Even though it seemed the girl had done nothing wrong, she replied more firmly, "I have checked. You will have to change your seat. Otherwise, I will have to call security." Ava's eyes remained calm, though there was a hint of discomfort in her tone. "My ticket is completely valid. You may check once more. Otherwise, I will not move without a justified reason." Miranda could no longer hide the tension in her voice. "I do not have time for arguments." "Miss Carter," Miranda said, her voice lowering into a rough whisper, "your seat is not valid. If you do not move, I will call security." Ava closed her eyes gently, as if regaining her composure. "Very well," she said, without protest. "I will move." The airplane cabin suddenly buzzed with whispers among the passengers. A few people began to notice that something was amiss, and quiet conversations started to arise. Every eye was fixed on Ava as she stood up and slowly gathered her belongings. There was no word of resistance, yet the discomfort on her face was unmistakable. A man sitting by the window glanced over and then whispered to his companion, "What's wrong with her? Why does she have to move? Could it be that her ticket isn't valid?" His companion nodded, their voice filled with surprise. "I thought she was a first-class passenger. There must be some reason. Maybe it's just a mistake." Ava felt the scrutiny of those around her, but she paid no heed. She walked through the passenger cabin unhurriedly, neither rushed nor flustered, simply moving with the ease of someone accustomed to being observed. Each step she took, graceful yet powerful, was as if she were walking on her own path, unchangeable by anyone. At that moment, Miranda stood at a distance watching Ava move, as a peculiar restlessness welled up within her. Just as Ava was about to enter the main cabin, the curious gazes of the passengers continued to follow her, and whispered conversations still floated in the air. Yet Ava remained indifferent. She continued her move to the main cabin, walking as if she knew very well that things would not end here. The entire airplane cabin remained in silence, with the gentle hum of the engines forming an indispensable background soundtrack for the journey. Everything seemed to be proceeding normally, until Miranda's phone vibrated, breaking the quiet space around her. She glanced at the phone screen. The blue light from the display was like a warning, signaling that something was amiss. The screen showed an unfamiliar phone number, but she did not need to think long. Miranda immediately recognized that it was a call from the airline's operations office. Her eyes flashed with a hint of worry, but she quickly pressed the answer button, trying to maintain her composure. "Miranda Scott," she said, her voice calm yet unable to hide the tension behind her words. The voice on the other end, cold and clear, instantly made Miranda feel as though she were being squeezed by the tense atmosphere. "Hello, Miranda. This is the operations office. We have received a complaint from a first-class passenger, Ava Carter. She has reported an incident on today's flight and requested that we investigate. Miranda stiffened, instantly feeling the weight of every word spoken on the other end. "What did Miss Carter request?" Miranda murmured, her voice trembling slightly, though she tried not to let it show. "She requested that we investigate the matter thoroughly, and we require you to provide a detailed report on the situation, ensuring that the passenger is treated with the utmost respect," the voice continued, cold and uncompromising. A chill ran down Miranda's spine. Her eyes blinked as she bit her lower lip, trying not to reveal her worry. "Yes, I understand," she replied, though inside an indescribable sense of unease surged within her. "We will need your report as soon as we land," the voice continued. "We will also be monitoring this situation, so make sure you act professionally. We will review the entire matter, and if any inappropriate actions are found, the airline will take further steps." That voice was firm, leaving no room for any evasion. The call ended, and Miranda let the phone fall onto her thigh. She stared at the dark screen, feeling as if a bomb had exploded in her head. Every word from the operations office echoed in her mind like a reminder of the mistake she could not escape. She had done wrong. A wave of anxiety surged over her, enveloping her completely. Everything now seemed shattered. Miranda looked around, and the airplane cabin no longer maintained the silence it once had. Every step she took, every action she made, felt heavier. She tried to return to her work, continuing to serve the passengers, but every glance from those around made her feel as though she were being watched, as if all attention were focused on her. The feeling of tension would not let her go. She could no longer concentrate on her work as before. The words from the call still echoed in her mind. She returned to the flight attendant galley, pouring water for a passenger, but her hands trembled as she set the cup on the table. The passenger beside her gave a knowing glance, but no one said a word. The eyes of the other passengers seemed inescapable to Miranda. She sensed furtive, suspicious glances, and she began to feel a growing distance between herself and those around her. Her gaze quickly swept across the first-class cabin, where Ava sat quietly. The feeling of anxiety returned. Ava sat there, showing no emotion, yet her calmness seemed to challenge Miranda. Ava did not react, did not speak up. But in Miranda's eyes, Ava was creating an instability that she could not understand. That girl was too steadfast, too calm, and that only made Miranda feel more confused and fearful. Miranda sighed, then turned away, trying to regain her composure. She could not let everyone see that she was worried. But somehow, every action of hers now seemed like part of an uncompleted test. The feeling of losing control made Miranda feel increasingly burdened. Ava continued to sit still, her gaze unmoving and without a trace of panic, as if everything around her did not exist. She looked out the window, where clouds drifted by like soft white fabric petals, a peaceful space, far removed from the tension of the flight. She could hear the roar of the airplane engines, but those were merely faint sounds, incapable of disturbing her serene mood. She pulled out her phone, and her fingers swiftly swiped across the screen, typing a short message. It appeared that Ava had prepared for the next move, though no one could predict what would happen. Her fingers moved lightly, as if rearranging everything according to a plan that only she understood. No one knew what she was doing, but her calmness could not hide her determination. A slight smile crossed Ava's lips as she pressed send. She then put the phone into her pocket and returned to her notebook, continuing to write her notes with intense focus. Ava was not in a hurry, not worried about anything. Every action she took was purposeful. Every step was calculated meticulously. None of her movements were random. The glances from the nearby passengers and the quiet conversations around her could not distract her. She was the center of attention, but not in the way people assumed. Ava did not need to assert her power or do anything to draw attention. She simply needed to be herself. And in that tranquility, she created an invisible strength that compelled everything around her to comply. Miranda silently looked toward Ava once more, but this time, her gaze was no longer as resolute as before. There was something in the way Ava sat so still, in her unusually serene demeanor, that made Miranda question whether she truly understood this girl. Who was Ava? Why could she remain so calm when everything around her was collapsing? When Miranda returned to her work, everything was no longer as it had been. She could not shake the urge to understand Ava, to discover why she could stand so firm in this situation. Meanwhile, Miranda's tension and anxiety continued to envelop her, making her feel as though she were trapped in a situation with no escape. The flight finally landed, and the passengers began to gather their belongings, preparing for the next steps. However, in the passenger cabin, the tension had not completely subsided. Miranda Scott, the flight attendant, stood motionless, her eyes pensive as she watched each passenger leave the plane. She could not shake the feeling of restlessness building in her chest. As everyone prepared to disembark, a group of security personnel appeared. They entered the first-class cabin swiftly and decisively, their eyes fixed on Miranda. Although their presence did not directly spell out anything, Miranda sensed that all attention was now focused on her. One of them, a man with a serious demeanor, stepped closer to Miranda and looked at her coldly. "Are you Miranda Scott?" he asked, his tone cold and unyielding. Miranda swallowed hard, feeling as if her throat had tightened. "Yes," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. But inside, she felt a surge of anxiety, as if everything were about to collapse. "We need you to come with us to answer some questions regarding your actions on this flight," the man continued, not giving Miranda a chance to respond. She felt cold sweat beginning to form on her forehead, her heart pounding. Yet she tried to stand upright. While they led Miranda out, a few remaining passengers from the first-class cabin turned back to look at her, their eyes filled with curiosity. No one dared to speak, but the silence was louder than ever. A series of unspoken questions filled the air. What happened? Why is she being taken away like that? Those looks made Miranda feel as if she were standing in the eye of a storm, completely exposed. Once in the interrogation room, Miranda faced two police officers. The atmosphere in the room was cold, tense, and oppressively silent. The officers wasted no time with unnecessary questions. They demanded that Miranda provide a detailed report of her actions regarding Ava, particularly her decision to move her from first class to the main cabin. "Can you explain why you required a first-class passenger to change seats without a justified reason?" one officer asked, his piercing eyes scrutinizing Miranda as if trying to extract every detail. Miranda tried to remain calm, but the confusion inside her was growing by the minute. She wanted to say something to defend her actions, but every time she opened her mouth, the words vanished. I was just following procedure." Her answer faltered, unable to be fully voiced. "Procedure?" the officer interrupted her, his voice utterly unyielding. "According to procedure, a flight attendant does not have the right to require a passenger to change seats without a valid reason, and you did not verify her ticket. Her ticket is for first class. You cannot arbitrarily reassign a passenger without a proper justification." Miranda felt her face turn pale. She realized she had been wrong, but now any explanation was too late. She had violated the airline's policies and was now facing the consequences. Every second passed like a blow to her chest, and every question was like a knife cutting into the confidence she once possessed. While Miranda faced the questioning and began to grasp the severity of the situation, Ava maintained her composure. As she disembarked from the plane, no one could notice any change in her demeanor. She did not appear worried, nor did she show any emotion. Ava's gaze remained as steady and clear as it had been when she boarded the plane. In fact, it seemed that everything happening to her was merely part of a grand plan she had prepared long ago. Ava was not simply a passenger. She was a woman who had faced numerous challenges in life, and this time, no one could make her waver. She remained calm, showing no signs of panic, as if she knew exactly where everything was headed. Although she had been humiliated, forced to change seats for no valid reason, Ava did not display any sign of anger or panic. She quietly complied with the request, not because she had no choice, but because she understood that her actions would have far-reaching implications. When she boarded the vehicle leaving the airport, Ava's thoughts were not solely on the incident that had just occurred, but on the larger changes she intended to create. She had prepared for these consequences beforehand, knowing that an investigation would follow, yet she also knew that this was not a personal matter. It was about changing a system, altering a culture that she could not accept. She understood that to change a system that had been established for so long, decisive and strong actions were required. Thus, Ava not only stood up for herself, but also resolved to drive significant changes in the airline's policies. She demanded that the airline implement mandatory sensitivity training programs, focusing on avoiding bias and discrimination for all employees. She knew that without profound changes in the attitudes and awareness of the staff, incidents like these would continue to happen, and no one would truly learn from such mistakes. Ava was not just a woman who had been insulted on a flight. She became a symbol of the necessary change in a system that had long failed to uphold fairness. After everything that happened on Flight 287, Ava Carter could not simply endure the injustice. She realized that change could not come only from individuals like herself. It had to be driven from within, from the very system that existed. She knew that if she truly wanted to change the deep-seated prejudices and bias entrenched in the organization, she needed to act. This was not only about her personal change, but also about others, the passengers who would come after her, and the flight attendants who would face similar situations. Ava decided not to let this injustice pass without a strong protest. As soon as she returned to the office, she called her assistant, Maya, to plan a meeting with the airline's board of directors. Maya, I want to arrange an urgent meeting with the board, Ava said in a determined tone. We need to create change in this company, and I will not back down until it happens. Maya, understanding Ava's determination, immediately contacted the airline's top executives. An important meeting was scheduled within a day, and Ava knew this was the only opportunity to push forward the reforms she had been contemplating and preparing for all along. When the meeting began, Ava entered the conference room where the senior directors of the airline were present. The atmosphere in the room was tense, but Ava felt no anxiety. She stood firmly, her eyes fixed on the people before her, and began the discussion with an unwavering resolve that could not be ignored. We have not done enough, Ava began, her voice steady. What happened to me was not just a personal incident. It is about the system, a system that has allowed such behavior to continue unchecked. We cannot let this go on. I demand that the airline's board immediately implement mandatory training programs on sensitivity, fairness, and the avoidance of bias for all employees. The room fell silent, every gaze fixed on Ava, the determined and resilient woman. Ava continued, we cannot keep turning a blind eye to bias, nor allow passengers and employees to feel that they are being treated unfairly simply because they are different. I demand a well-structured training system so that all staff fully understand these issues and learn how to act respectfully and fairly. Richard Hale, the CEO, could not help but acknowledge the seriousness in Ava's request. He nodded, though with concern. Ava, we understand the issue, but you must understand that changing the entire process is not simple. We must carefully consider these measures. Ava remained unmoved. I understand that you need time, but I cannot wait. What I went through is only a small part of the problem. Thousands of other passengers, thousands of other employees will never speak up if we do not act now. If you truly want to be a leading company, then it must start with you. Everyone in the room sat in silence, as if lost in their own thoughts. Ava continued to urge, her voice still strong. In addition to training staff, I demand that the airline reform its internal reporting process. The current system lacks accountability and turns a blind eye to incidents like these. We need a transparent mechanism where every wrongful act is investigated and dealt with severely. The tension in the room deepened, yet Ava felt no fear. She knew that what she was doing was not only for herself, but also for others who had no voice. She understood that change was necessary, and now was the time to begin. Finally, Richard spoke in a deep yet agreeable tone. "You are right, Ava. This is a major issue. We will work with you to implement these reforms." When the meeting ended, Ava did not rush out but paused for a moment. She looked out the window, reflecting on what had transpired. It had been a long time since she felt such strong determination, and she knew that the battle was far from over. Yet one of the things that made her truly satisfied was Clara, the only flight attendant who had shown kindness and empathy toward her throughout the flight. Clara had stood by her side, without judgment or bias, simply doing her job with dedication and compassion. Ava could not forget Clara. She realized that within an organization, people like Clara were the ones truly worthy of recognition. Although she could not change the entire system overnight, she could help ensure that those deserving, like Clara, had the opportunity to advance. Ava called Clara into her office after the meeting. Clara entered, slightly surprised and unsure why she was being called. Ava looked at Clara with eyes full of recognition. "Clara," Ava began, "I want to thank you for the kindness you showed me during the flight. You were the only one who did not treat me as an issue, but looked at me as a human being." Clara felt a bit embarrassed by Ava's compliment. "Thank you, Ava. I was just doing my job." Ava smiled, her eyes filled with appreciation. "You did your job very well, and you deserve to be recognized for your professionalism and kindness. I propose to the board that you be promoted to a higher position in the company." Clara looked at Ava with wide eyes, hardly able to believe what she had just heard. "Really? Thank you so much, Ava. I don't know what to say. I was just doing my job." Ava nodded, her determination undimmed. "You are not just doing your job, Clara. You do it with heart, with respect, and with compassion. That is precisely why you deserve a greater opportunity." A surge of joy overwhelmed Clara, and in that moment, she knew her life had changed forever. Ava was not only someone who stood up for justice, but also a person who helped and created opportunities for those who deserved them. The final investigation was complete, and a decisive decision was made. Miranda Scott, once regarded as an outstanding employee of the airline, now had to face the consequences of her actions. There was no valid reason for the request to move Ava from first class to the main cabin, and her actions had violated the airline's strict anti-discrimination policy. What seemed like a minor decision made in a moment had far-reaching implications for everyone involved. When Miranda received notice of her dismissal, a feeling of emptiness overwhelmed her mind. She sat in her office, her eyes clouded by the unavoidable truth. "Miranda," the voice of the airline's CEO echoed over the phone. "We regret to inform you that your decision to require the movement of passenger Ava Carter was unreasonable and violated the company's anti-discrimination policies. After a thorough investigation, the final decision is that you will no longer be employed by this airline." A silence fell over Miranda's workspace. The words she heard echoed in her head, each phrase like a knife cutting into her mind. She had never imagined that everything would end this way. She had only been performing a duty that she believed was right, with no malice or intent to discriminate, but now everything was different. Regret slowly crept into her heart. That feeling was overwhelming and undeniable. Miranda could not escape the pain of realizing that not only had her career been ruined, but her actions had also tarnished the reputation of the entire airline. She could not understand how, after all her years of hard work, one wrong decision could cause her to lose everything. The image of Ava, her calm gaze as she left first class, seemed an indelible reminder of what Miranda had done. Miranda sat in stunned silence, her eyes fixed on the empty desk before her. She could not deny that her actions had led to this outcome. She had been wrong. And that mistake was not just a personal failing, but a shortfall in her understanding and ability to control her emotions. She had not realized the severe consequences her decision would bring upon herself and those around her. A wave of remorse began to surge, like a violent tide crashing over her. Everything became a blur in her mind. Not only the loss of her job, but the realization that she had contributed to maintaining a system she once believed she understood, yet failed to recognize the discrimination inherent in her actions. Since the incident on Flight 287 ended, Ava has not been able to stop thinking about what happened and the impact it could cause. She not only faced discrimination and unfair treatment from a flight attendant, but also realized that this was an opportunity to drive a major change. It was not only about changing the airline system, but also about changing the mindset and perceptions of an entire community. The first steps were taken immediately after the meeting with the board, and Ava felt somewhat satisfied to see that her demands were beginning to be taken seriously. However, she could not be complacent about the next steps. Each move would be an important part of a larger plan. Therefore, when an unexpected email appeared in her inbox, Ava couldn't help but feel that something was special. Being someone who always strives for real change, Ava did not expect a hasty, insincere apology. But upon opening the email, she felt a small change in her heart. The email was from Miranda Scott, the flight attendant who had unreasonably asked her to change seats and put her in an awkward situation throughout the flight. "Dear Ms. Carter," the email began, with Miranda's tone now different from what Ava had experienced during the flight. "I would like to offer my sincere apology for my actions on that flight. After careful reflection, I realized that I was wrong to judge you based solely on personal prejudices and not properly assess your situation." Miranda continued, admitting that she had acted hastily and without properly verifying Ava's situation. "I understand that asking you to change your seat was not only an administrative mistake, but also a disrespectful act toward you and your status on the flight. I am truly sorry for making you feel uncomfortable." Ava sensed a change in this apology, a recognition of wrongdoing that is not always easy. For her, this was not just an ordinary apology, but a significant step toward changing Miranda's mindset and perhaps an opportunity to spark change within herself as well. Ava read the email several times, a complex feeling rising inside her. She felt that although this apology could not erase what had happened, it at least created a connection between the two, a necessary bridge for change to begin. Miranda not only recognized her mistake, but also seemed to have embarked on a journey of self-learning and change. Feeling the sincerity in Miranda's email, Ava decided not only to read it, but also to respond. Not just out of courtesy, but because she wanted to encourage Miranda's progress and, perhaps, inspire her own journey of change. Ava opened her inbox and began composing a reply. She sat at her desk, carefully considering every word. She knew that a response could have great power, and she wanted to use that power rightly. "Dear Miranda," she began, her tone calm yet full of empathy. "Thank you for your email. I appreciate the sincerity and self-awareness you demonstrated in your apology. Recognizing and admitting one's mistakes is an important step on the path of self-learning and personal growth, and I truly feel that you are on the right track." Ava continued, her words gentle, yet weighty. "I understand that we do not always immediately realize our mistakes, but what matters is that we learn from them and prevent them from happening again. This not only helps us grow, but also builds a fairer and more respectful environment for everyone." She paused for a moment, reminding herself that her advice was not only encouragement for Miranda, but also a message for herself. That responsibility is not just an abstract concept, but the first step in changing oneself and the world around us. Ava typed on, "Continuing on the path of learning and self-improvement is something I encourage you to do. Every small step is important, and once you understand the necessity of personal responsibility, that is when real change begins. I hope that you will continue to grow and become someone who can make a difference for yourself and those around you." Finally, Ava concluded her email in a gentle yet firm manner. "Thank you once again for your understanding and willingness to improve. I believe that you will go far and bring about positive change. Always remember that recognizing one's mistakes is not a bad thing. It is an opportunity to do better." When Ava sent her reply, she felt a sense of relief. Part of her felt reassured that although the incident had occurred, it was an opportunity for someone like Miranda to truly learn and change. And for Ava, it was a small victory on her long journey toward the larger change she was pursuing. She had not only transformed herself, but also inspired others. After Ava Carter's relentless efforts, the airline she had once faced challenges with began implementing significant reforms. The changes in the airline's policies not only brought about an internal transformation, but also had a strong impact on the entire aviation industry. Ava had not only stood up for personal justice, but also helped ignite a wave of change within the system, creating new opportunities for those who had been overlooked or misjudged due to unfounded prejudices. Following the tense meeting with the board, where Ava had demanded the implementation of mandatory training programs on sensitivity, fairness, and the avoidance of bias, the airline acted swiftly. New policies were introduced, requiring all employees, from flight attendants to managerial staff, to participate in these training sessions. Classes on empathy, recognizing and combating bias, and skills for handling situations fairly were organized monthly. With the participation of every department, the airline not only focused on technical training, but also placed great importance on building a work environment based on fairness and mutual respect. With Ava's support, the training program was not merely theoretical, but also illustrated through real-life scenarios, helping employees clearly understand the importance of sensitivity in their work. The airline also reformed its internal reporting process, establishing a clear monitoring system to ensure that every wrongful act, no matter how small, could be detected and addressed promptly. Ava was not just the one demanding change. She became an indispensable part of this system's transformation. She was recognized for her significant contributions to driving this change, not only within the airline, but also in the broader aviation industry. She proved that an individual, even just a first-class passenger, can make a powerful difference when they stand up for what is right. Acknowledged in internal meetings, Ava became a model of resilience and courage. The directors and employees of the airline all knew that Ava not only spoke, but also acted. Her advice was never mere theory. She transformed it into practical actions that had a profound impact on the collective. During the process of reform, and while monitoring the development of the team, Ava could not help but remember Clara, the one flight attendant who treated her with kindness and empathy throughout Flight 287. Although not directly involved, Clara made a significant difference by not allowing personal biases or unfair rules to hinder her professional and humane conduct. Ava recognized that Clara was an outstanding employee, truly deserving of recognition and advancement. Although Clara's job was to serve customers, in Ava's eyes, the dedication and the way Clara handled difficult situations without letting societal or racial standards affect her behavior demonstrated a different mindset. Ava believed that if anyone deserved a greater opportunity, it was Clara. One morning, when Clara entered Ava's office, she was surprised to see Ava standing up and greeting her with a warm smile. Ava said, "Clara, I want to thank you for everything you have done. You are one of the few on that flight who not only worked, but did so with heart and understanding. You are a true example of what I want to see in this industry." Clara, though very surprised, could not hide her emotion. "Thank you, Ava," Clara said. "I was just doing my job, but your words mean a great deal to me." Ava looked at Clara with eyes full of recognition. "Therefore, I would like to propose your promotion. You deserve a greater opportunity, and I believe you can contribute significantly to the company in a higher position." Hearing these words, Clara's heart felt as though it might leap out of her chest. "Really?" Clara exclaimed, her eyes widening in astonishment. "Thank you so much, Ava. This is something I never expected, but I will do my very best." Ava smiled. "I know you will do well. You have proven your ability. The company has many things that need to change, and I believe you will be an important part of that process." With Clara's promotion, Ava not only granted her a new career opportunity, but also marked an important milestone in changing the way people are perceived and respected in the workplace. Clara became a role model, not only within the company, but also a symbol of the change that Ava had created. Flight 287 was not merely a moment in Ava Carter's life. It became a turning point, a solid foundation for a journey that would never cease. Ava never stopped at mere words. She acted to create real change. Her story is not simply about a personal incident, but a symbol of a grand movement for justice, fairness, and personal accountability. Ava knew that change does not always come from grand actions or sudden events. Sometimes, it is only the patient steps, the steadfast decisions repeated day after day. For that reason, she continued to fight relentlessly, persistently carving out a path toward a fairer aviation industry. Ava participated in conferences and global forums on consumer rights, on fairness and anti-discrimination, where she not only shared her story, but also listened to the pain of others, those who still had no voice. In them, she saw a reflection of herself, an image from the past, and that was why she could not stop. Ava did not only speak about fairness, she implemented mandatory training programs for all employees in the aviation sector to help them develop a deep awareness of sensitivity, respect, and how to recognize bias. She understood that only when everyone truly changes from the inside out can this system transform. She was not just the one affecting change, but the one who upheld the noble values she had initiated. Every small action of hers was acknowledged and continued to spread. The workshops and lectures she led not only provided knowledge, but also inspired an entire generation of new employees and industry leaders. Ava believed that real change does not arise from spontaneous revolts, but from consistent, tireless actions in every day, every word, every small decision. And Ava, a woman who had once been a victim of discrimination, now became a guide, a beacon lighting the path to the justice she longed to see everywhere. None of us can change the past. That is the lesson Miranda Scott, after everything that had happened, had to face. She once believed that what she did was right, that she was merely carrying out her duties properly. But the truth was that her actions were not only wrong, but caused great harm. What Miranda understood after that incident on the flight was that discrimination, whether inadvertent or intentional, is never acceptable. But more importantly, it is crucial to recognize one's mistakes and have the ability to change. Miranda kept asking herself what she could do to atone for her actions. She understood that she could not go back and change what had happened, but she also knew that she could learn from her mistakes and become a better person. She embarked on a long journey, not to seek forgiveness, but to truly change herself. It was a journey with no shortcuts, no magic, only persistence and constant effort. She began to join a nonprofit organization dedicated to fighting for workers' rights and creating change in the workplace to prevent discrimination and bias. Miranda not only wanted to be part of the change, but also to learn and help others avoid making the same mistakes she did. She started attending training programs on fairness and sensitivity, courses that helped her gain a clearer understanding of social issues she had never previously considered. But Miranda's path was not easy. She knew that change does not come instantly. Every day, she faced herself, confronting the thoughts and decisions she had once made. However, every lesson was a step forward, each day an opportunity for her to become a better person. Today, Miranda is no longer just the flight attendant who once made a mistake. She has become a person with a mission, a person striving to build a work environment where no one has to face what Ava endured. And she knows that change within herself is the first step to making a profound impact. The story of Ava and Miranda is not merely a personal struggle, but also a valuable lesson about change. Sometimes, change does not come from grand revolutions, but from consistent steps, from recognizing mistakes and having the courage to correct them. Ava demonstrated that anyone, even an outsider, can make a difference. But to sustain that change requires persistence and determination. As for Miranda, she learned that mistakes are not the end, but an opportunity to start anew, to become a better person and provide real value to society. And from their story, we recognize that every individual can make a difference. Every action, no matter how small, can have a powerful impact on the world around us. When we begin to change ourselves, the world naturally changes along with us. If you find this story inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss future videos. Change begins with us, and only we can create a more just, respectful, and compassionate world. Have you ever encountered an unfair situation in life? And what did you do to face and change it? Please share your story in the comments so that we can all learn and create positive change in our community.